Hey guys, it's Paul here from TFL Car, and welcome to, well, slightly cloudy Monticello, New York, and the Monticello racetrack. And you can see behind me the 2022 Toyota GR86. And we're going to get to play with this thing on the track, on the road, and see what makes it tick. So under the hood of the new GR, we've got now a 2.4 liter engine. Now, if you remember, the previous generations of this car were a 2 liter. Of course, it's a boxer engine. This is a shared vehicle with Subaru, and Subaru supplies that flat 4 engine. And the 2 liter made 205 horsepower, and it had a torque peak up at 6,600 RPMs. This new 2.4, which is bored out, so they didn't increase the stroke, they increased the size of the piston, so they bored it out. And now it makes 228 horsepower and 184 pound-feet of torque. But the cool thing about the torque number is instead of being at 6,600 RPMs, it's at 3,700 RPMs. So we've got more torque and more horsepower, and that torque is also more accessible at lower RPMs. All right, we're at Monticello Raceway in New York in the 2022 Toyota GR86. And I'm in the premium car, so that means I've got adaptive headlights, not that I need them. But maybe more importantly, I've got the Michelin Pilot 4S's, which are fantastic tires. You hear this little engine just screaming. Lots of fun little slidey action here. (7,000 RPMs, 228 horsepower, just hitting the rev limiter there. Nice little 4-wheel drift all the way to the outside of the turn. Such fun. Again, hear that engine scream right into the rev limiter. Just happens to be the right radius for that corner. It's a well-balanced little car. The engine pulls right to red line. You tell I'm smiling. Little needless chicane to slither through. But the engine really kind of dominates this. It's funny to say that at 228 horsepower, but that's what I noticed. The chassis is really well balanced. The steering is good. There's a new power steering system. The other thing is I've got a Torsen rear limited slip differential. So again, at this price point, that's not something you would expect. So the advantage of the flat 4 engine is the fact that it helps you lower the center of gravity. And looking in here, you can see a very tall intake plenum. Don't let that fool you. The actual engine, the cylinder heads, and the block itself are much lower down. And so that's one of the hallmarks of this vehicle, is its very low center of gravity. So that really helps you as far as cornering goes. You don't have as much mass that's getting thrown around. You think as your center of gravity goes up and you get into like an SUV, how tippy they feel. And a race car, the other end of the scale, where you have a super low center of gravity and therefore you have much better handling as a result. So also under the hood, of course, we've got chassis braces, and there have been a bunch of improvements to this car, stuff you can see, stuff you can't see, but they've strengthened the chassis in torsion and in bending to kind of take advantage of the new horsepower, the new torque, the higher performance level, the more grip of the new tires. Transmissions, I don't think there are many cars out in the world where you can actually point at one, but you can actually see the transmission under the hood on this car, and actually see the serial number on it. And you have the option, of course, of a 6-speed manual or a 6-speed automatic. This year, the automatic also comes with paddle shifters as well, so that's a big improvement. So instead of having to shift sequentially on the lever itself, you can still do that, but you also have paddles on the steering wheel. So I've got to look at the street performance of the 2022 Toyota GR as well. I mean, that's obviously a big part of this. I guess you could buy this as a track day car, but most folks are going to buy one of these and probably drive it to work, at least in the summertime, since it's just rear-wheel drive, and then maybe spend some time on the track in it, or auto-crossing it, or whatever the case may be. But you know, this is just as important. And so we've got just the base model now with so no premium package. It is an automatic, and yeah, it's a pretty nice thing to drive. This is maybe where that 2.4 liter engine is going to be most obvious, because here's where you can just kind of waft along with the 6-speed automatic, and it's got enough torque now. The old one would be downshifting quite often whenever you get under sort of any sort of load conditions, where now, the engine being physically bigger, well, it feels like, you've got a little bit more torque to play with, and now it can roll along in kind of a higher gear. So it's less stressful to drive in normal driving situations. Probably my favorite part of the premium pack is this ducktail spoiler. And it kind of reminds me, if any of you guys are true JDM fans, Rocket Bunny body kits. This looks like one of those, and so they were one of the first guys to do that. We got the little vortex generators on the side, and also probably the oddest shaped fuel door I think I've ever seen. But hey, it fits the space. Now, looking at the interior of the car, first of all, it's not huge, but I would say it's actually probably bigger inside, to me, feeling-wise, than the Toyota Supra, for example. So it's not tiny either. And of course, you've got those little tiny back seats that are basically hitting against. So definitely for children only in the back, and that's if you have a short driver like me behind the wheel. So on the premium model, you get extra speakers for your stereo system. You get some Alcantara inserts also on the doors and also in the seats, and also heating on the seats as well. Now, the ride quality is definitely on the firm side, and I think that has to do, of course, with the performance nature of this car, and it's also fairly lightweight, 2,800 pound car. So it's certainly not what you would call jarring or anything along those lines, but it's firm. It feels like it's a low car that's kind of buttoned down. And, again, the plus side is it feels like amazing control, and indeed you have it, but it certainly isn't going to give you the ride that you would get in some other vehicles that are bigger and heavier. And I'd say, specifically like thinking of like a Camaro, which, believe it or not, does compete with this car in price and four-cylinder engine version and all that. That's going to have a little bit smoother ride. This car is definitely smaller, more compact, more sporty, more in the vein, of its direct competitor, which would be the Miata. So we've got an 8-inch touchscreen that we can use here, but that's not really the big news on the GR. It's actually the instrument cluster. It's gone from analog gauges to a full digital display. And you've got different modes that you can have there, and you notice that it even has a G meter on the left-hand side. So I've got this great 6-speed manual, of course. That's kind of a hallmark of this car. One important thing to note is that with the automatic that has the paddle shifters, the one additional thing you'll get with the automatic is it comes with all the active safety features, such as their pre-collision, auto braking, all those types of features. Those features you can't get with a manual transmission car. In a way, it kind of makes sense, because a lot of those features require the automatic transmission to really work. Depending on your preferences, I think you guys know by now I like manual transmissions, but I get that a lot of people like paddle shift automatics or dual clutches. And now, since we have the ability to shift via paddles, you can keep your hands on the wheel for all that spirited driving that you're probably pretty likely to do in a car like this, because it just is always tempting you to want to have fun in it. So when talking about wheel, tire, and suspension, I already did mention that the chassis has been stiffened across the board with the car. They've done different welds. They've got this O-ring structure they've put in where the pass-through is for the back now. Different braces going on all over the car. Most of them you can't see, but the numbers speak for themselves. And that's all because we've got more grip. And here we've got a premium car that has the Michelin Pilot Sport 4S's on it. And these also beautiful forged wheels where they say this is actually shaped to be like a katana sword. There you go, marketing at its very best as a Japanese sports car. And we also have 11.6-inch front brakes and 11.4 in the rear. Of course, they're ventilated. And on top of that, we've got a McPherson strut in the front and a multi-link in the rear. On the base car, you don't get the 18-inch Michelin Pilot Sport 4S's. You actually get a 17-inch Michelin Primacy tire as the tire on the base car. And we're talking about a car that's supposed to come in sub $30,000. And so it's fun to see little details like actual true working ventilation on the car's vents that actually help airflow, remove pressure from the wheel well, which helps reduce lift and maybe produce a little bit of downforce. So lots of cool little details in these GR cars that separate them from your normal cars. So 2022 Toyota 86 GR, is it all that and a bag of chips? That's pretty fun. Coming from, these days used to driving cars with so much more horsepower, but this thing's 2,800 pounds, 228 horsepower, good Michelin tires, really nice setup, chassis, suspension, and a fun revving engine, and a good manual transmission. What more could you like? And then the best part about all this, of course, is we're talking about a car that starts out, it should, pick up where the old car left off and start out at under $30,000. So the new 2022 GR86, what's it like? Well, it's an incremental but substantial improvement on the outgoing car. We've got a bigger engine with more horsepower, more torque that's more usable. We've got more grip, an upgraded chassis. Just about everything in this car has been improved. And it's always been a really fun car. And the thing I think to keep in mind when you're thinking about this car and whether it's turbocharged or not and all the things you'd love to see this car be, remember that there's Supras above this, right? That this thing is sub $30,000. That's right. It's supposed to stay that way for the 2022 car, where it starts under $30,000 and goes up from there. And when you factor that in, you're looking at it now more against Miatas, and you're looking at it against four-cylinder Mustangs and four-cylinder Camaros and N-Coupes from Hyundai, things like that, Velosters and Honda Civics. It's a heck of a little car, and it really is a throwback to the old Toyota 2000s. Proper rear-wheel drive, simple, naturally aspirated, lightweight, incredibly fun to drive, the 2022 GR.